Hello and welcome to today's episode. I'm recording this episode after 2 months almost. Was busy with some exams, and now I'm free, and now I'm recording. A lot of things have happened. And I missed out on many of those. But I'll cover them briefly, and I'll share my thoughts with you. So let's get started with Israel. Israel bombed Iranian consulate in Syria on 1st of April 2024. The consulate, which is next to the main embassy building in Damascus' Mezza district, was struck at about 5 pm on Monday. Several IRGC members, that's the Iranian military, several IRGC military advisors were in the building at the time of attack and 7 were killed, according to the IRGC statement. The statement said Zahedi and Hajriami Hajriahimi were among the dead. Zahedi was the leader of the Kurds force in Lebanon and Syria until 2016. Zahedi was a critical figure in relationship between Iran and Hezbollah. New York Times reported that an anonymous source from the Revolutionary Guards said that the strike targeted a meeting between Iranian intelligence officials and Palestinian militants, including leaders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who were discussing the war in Gaza. Many countries, including Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia condemned the attack. Spain, Italy, Brazil, Russia, and China also condemned the attack. USA, UK, France, and Germany warned Iran to not retaliate against Israel. However, there wasn't any major coverage in corporate news media about the Israeli attack on Iran. They covered, however, the Iranian retaliation. Iran launched missiles in Israel on 13th of April 2024. It advertised it in 72 hours advanced. So this response was a show of force, not an escalation. Iran launched around 170 drones, over 30 cruise missiles, and more than 120 ballistic missiles. Israel said most of them were shot down. Its critics say Iran hit Israeli military locations, and Israel is pretending to have stopped them by showing civilian locations. Many countries like Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Kuwait closed their airspace as they don't want collateral damage of what happens between Israel and Iran. Americans, British, French helped Israel. To many people's surprise, not mine, Saudis and Jordanians also said to have helped Israel defend against Iran. Iranian retaliation cost it less than $200 million. Israel shooting the Iranian missiles, Israel shooting them down cost it $1.3 billion. Iran also got some intelligence on Israeli capabilities. Western countries reaffirmed their support to Israel. There was also this viral video of David Cameron being a hypocrite. If I can find it, I'll link it.
Reckless and dangerous thing for Iran to have done. And I think the whole world can see all these countries that have somehow wondered, well, what is the true nature of Iran? It's there in black and white.
What would Britain do if a hostile nation flattened one of our consulates?
Well, we would take the very strong action.
On 18th April, Israel launched strikes on Iran. Reports of attack near Isfahan and military sites in Iraq and Syria. USA to sanction an IDF unit. The unit is called Netza Yehuda. The battalion is made of 900 soldiers. It is an IDF unit created in 1999 to accommodate the religious beliefs of ultra-Orthodox and national religious communities. It is accused of human rights violation in occupied West Bank. At the same time, USA passed a bill which includes $14 billion in military aid to Israel and $9 billion in humanitarian aid to Gaza. Israeli PM Netanyahu wrote on X, "Sanctions must not be imposed on Israeli Defense Force. In recent weeks, I have been working against imposition of sanctions on Israeli citizens, including in my conversation with senior American government officials. At the same time, our soldiers are fighting the monsters of terror. The intention to impose a sanction on a unit in the IDF is the height of absurdity and a moral law. The government headed by me will act by all means against these moves. For obvious reasons, there was basically panic, silent panic in the governments across the world. If there was going to be a war, if there's a war, then oil prices will go up and there will be a lot of chaos. But the war, chances of war are unlikely at this point. Here's why. Israelis are surrounded by Iranian proxies. Hamas in Gaza. Hamas is, some people say, a proxy of Iran, some people say it's not. But let's just pretend it is. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon. On the west, Israel also has the Mediterranean Sea. Iran is surrounded by American allies. On the western side, the Arab nations that have US military bases. And Turkey, which is a NATO nation. On the northwestern side. I think it is northwest. On the eastern side, Iran has border disputes with, or geographical disputes, border disputes, water disputes with Afghanistan and Pakistan. US left a lot of weapons to Afghanistan when they left. And Pakistan's anti-American PM, Imran Khan, was ousted in a coup. On the northern side of Iran, Azerbaijan wants northern Iranian territory full of ethnic Azeris. So there's another border dispute. On the southern side of Iran, there's the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. That is, both Israel and Iran are surrounded by proxies friendly to the other side. Syria has troops, military bases and proxies of US, Israel, Iran and Russia. If there is a war, it will be a proxy war. And if you look at a direct war, possibility of direct war between Israel and Iran, USA and Iran, US has sent a lot of US has spent a lot of its ammunitions and artillery in Ukraine against the proxy war against Russia, the proxy war against Russia. And Israel has also spent a lot of its military in Gaza. So they are not really in a position to go to war. Both the Israeli and the Iranian economies are not doing well at this point. Well, neither is US, but the chances of a war are extremely unlikely. I'm not saying it will not happen, but like I'm saying, extremely unlikely. So we can rest assured, the oil prices probably will not go up. I hope so. Fingers crossed. That's that. Another question: is Prime Minister Netanyahu leading Israel towards a disaster? First of all, he was supposed to be this security guy, and the worst terrorist attack happened under his leadership. It's a well-known fact that he was in support of Hamas because he wanted to use a divide and conquer tactic. So in the Gaza, which is on the western side of Israel, he wanted to have Hamas in charge, and on the West Bank, which is I think in the east of Israel, he was fine with Palestinian Liberation Authority. He didn't want one of these political groups to control both sides of the Palestine, Gaza and West Bank. He didn't want that. Divide and conquer. And Hamas did the worst terrorist attack. Just 1 month before, Israel sent some money to Hamas via Qatar in the September of 2023. Just 1 month before the October 7 attacks. And after this attack and Israeli retaliation, they have lost all the moral support of the West, of the international community. No, international community, I don't mean just the West, but all of the international community. After the October 7 attack, there was many people were sympathetic towards Israel because of the terrorist attack. But how they have retaliated, so something like 30,000 Palestinians in Gazans are dead, and on October 7, like 1,200, 300 something Israelis were dead. So you get the point. Israelis have lost the sympathy of all of the world that it had after October 7. This is quite similar to how US had the sympathy of the world after the 9/11 attacks, but they lost it all after the Iraq war. Kind of what Israel has done. Israel has done the same. What the Israelis should have done is, first of all, sanction Hamas. UN sanctions like the ones on North Korea. They should have sanctioned Hamas by approaching the UN. Second, go after the Hamas leaderships, which is in Qatar, not in Gaza, but they are in Qatar. They should have gone after them and maybe hand over the territory of Gaza to Palestinian Liberation Authority, Palestinian Authority, the one led by Mahmoud Abbas, I think his name is. That's what should have happened after the October 7 attacks. But that's not what happened. Israel is retaliated hard. Some people say it's a genocide. Some people say it's collective punishment. Some people say it's ethnic cleansing. People can use terms, but that retaliation was not in the best interest of Israel. Not just in the best interest of Gazans, but also against Israel. They've lost all the sympathy. They were very close to diplomatic recognition by Saudi Arabia, which means Israel, if Saudis were to recognize Israel, they would have had a lot of legitimacy in the Islamic world. Saudis own the Makkah and Medina. It's under their territory. So, if Saudis had recognized Israel, then many Muslims would have accepted Israel, except maybe the fringe radical ones. So that's not happening now because the leaders are kind of neutral on this, but the people are extremely sympathetic to Palestinians. The Muslim populations of many of these big Arab nations, they're extremely sympathetic to Palestinians now because of actions of Israel. So they've lost that opportunity. Israeli economy is like what? Down 20% or something like that? Just terrible. So a lot of bad things have been, a lot of bad moves were done by Israel because of the bad leadership. So that's all the Israel war updates, Israel-Gaza war. Let's turn towards the nuclear war. Not the nuclear war, the Ukraine war. We'll come to the nuclear war after this. So, Ukraine updates. There was a terrorist attack in Crocus City Hall in Moscow, which was just another provocation by Ukraine. And people are starting to notice how ISIS attacks enemies of USA and Israel, or the countries that have displeased USA or Israel or Israel. So there were attacks in France and Germany after they tried to do they tried to be more receptive towards Iran because of Iranian natural gas, and they had terrorist attacks by ISIS. So anyway, recently there was terrorist attack on Crocus City Hall in Moscow, which was another provocation by Ukraine. That's that. Another after Avdiivka, which fell almost 2 months ago, another major town, Chasiv Yar, is about to fall. For 6 months, almost 6 months, US couldn't pass $60 billion aid to Ukraine. Recently, it passed $61 billion for Ukraine, $8 billion for Indo-Pacific region. This is on Saturday, April 20th. I've mentioned before, they also passed aid to Israel and Gaza. So there's that. The total aid was $95 billion, if I remember correctly. But this aid will not do much for Ukraine. Why? Because Ukrainians lack the manpower. There's mobilization going on in Ukraine, but they don't have enough training. The only way this aid can help Ukraine is if NATO troops start fighting the war, but just with Ukrainian uniforms. NATO trained troops, professional troops, fight for Ukraine in Ukrainian uniforms. But even that will not do much. If a few months ago, you remember the failed Ukrainian counteroffensive? That's what will happen if NATO troops were to fight Russia in Ukrainian uniforms. So this will not change much. There are severe ammunition shortages. And they cannot keep up. Entire NATO cannot produce as many rounds as Russia can. That's just. And NATO budget is what? Over 800, 900 to $1 trillion, something like that. And Russian budget is $100 billion. It used to be $80 billion. Now it's $100 billion. Yeah, there are rumors of a Russian offensive with 300,000 troops, possibly on the city of Kharkiv. Kharkiv is a major historical Russian city. It became part of Ukraine under the Soviet Union and after the collapse of Soviet Union. And Kharkov is called, I think it was called Kharkov or Kharkov in Russian. Under the Soviet Union. I think that's what it was called. But it's now called Kharkiv or Kharkiv. And there are rumors that a major Russian offensive will be coming to annex Kharkiv. We'll see what happens. Next topic. Nuclear proliferation in the multipolar world. These are just my thoughts. This is just personal opinion. Just entertain what I'm about to say. I'm worried about nuclear proliferation as the world shifts to a multipolar world. The three main areas of concern are, of course, the Arab world, Europe, and East Asia. I'm not the first person to worry about nuclear proliferation in the Islamic world or the Arab world, but let me share my thoughts. We know Iran has a nuclear program. If Iran is to become a nuclear power, then so will Saudi Arabia, possibly UAE, Qatar, and other monarchies too. If Iran and Saudis were to become nuclear power, then Turkey will want them too. This is the Islamic world becoming nuclear powers. But remember, US has military bases in all of the countries mentioned except Iran. Turkey is a NATO country. Both Iran and Turkey have their own military industrial complexes, along with weapons purchased from USA and Russia. Iran is purchasing from Russia, Turkey is from US. Turkey is also purchasing from Russia. Or at least they tried to. Then we have Europe. The Europeans are worried about a major war with Russia. The main reason for this is foolish American foreign policy towards Russia. They have cancelled missile treaties. Of course, we know about the NATO expansion, which led to the conflict in Ukraine. After this war, there's a definite risk of Germany and Poland getting nuclear weapons. Now, Germany will not be aggressive with nuclear weapons. They'll want them as deterrents. Germans already have civilian nuclear technology, although they are deindustrializing that too for some foolish reason. They're getting rid of their nuclear reactors. But they can have nuclear reactors if they want to. And remember, it was the Germans who originally invented missiles during the Second World War. I think it was called the V2 rocket. I think it was called V2 rocket, if I remember correctly. And then USA and Soviet Union took those German scientists in, and that's how we got the space program with NASA and Roscosmos, I think the Russian counterpart is. Germany will get it mostly as a deterrence. Germany is the biggest economy in Europe, and and they also share border with France. It's not just the Russians. France is also a nuclear power. And Poland has a terrible history with both Germany and Russia. If either Germany or Poland get nuclear weapons, the other country will follow. And maybe some other Scandinavian countries. I'm not saying they won't, but they probably will. Maybe Greece, maybe... You can speculate. You can do all kinds of speculation. But Germany and Poland are the most likely countries to have the motivation to have their own nuclear weapons program. Now we come to East Asia. In East Asia, China, Russia and North Korea are all nuclear powers. If there is a war in East Asia, Japan will most likely become a nuclear power. Again, Japan has world-class engineers. They also have a civilian nuclear program, civilian nuclear reactors. If you remember the 2011 tsunamis and the subsequent Fukushima disaster, which is Japan's Chernobyl, basically. Taiwan is extremely unlikely to become a nuclear power. Taiwanese can figure it out, of course, but they probably will not for political reasons. One China policy. If South Korea isn't attacked by North Korea, but Taiwan is attacked by China, South Korea will also become a nuclear power post-war. So Japan, possibly South Korea, and in the south of East Asia, the Southeast Asia, I'm not going to count out Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia and Singapore. I'm not saying they will become nuclear, but I'm not going to count them out either. If nuclear proliferation starts like just spreading like wildfire. With the exception of Iran and Russia, China and North Korea. All the countries that I just mentioned have American military bases. So them going nuclear will require Americans to look the other way, or Americans removing their military bases from these countries. I'd like to remind people that Libya had a nuclear program. After negotiating with the West, Libya decided to dismantle its nuclear program. Then a few years later, USA and its NATO allies invaded Libya and overthrew its government in 2011. So anyone who's worried about another nuclear power attacking them will try to get nuclear weapons just for deterrence purposes. Like I said, many countries that will want to go nuclear will require Americans to look the other way, or Americans removing their military bases from those countries. So what will the US do? US is going through a slow collapse. Its debt to GDP ratio has crossed 100%. Its interest payments are more than its defense budgets. So Americans will have no choice but to withdraw its military bases and cut its military spending. Or all the countries that I mentioned also collapse with the United States and they rise again when US rises again. If America somehow can manage to keep up their military spending, then all the countries that have nuclear American bases will collapse with America, and they will return back to the world stage with America as America rises again after the collapse. So the question is, what overseas military bases will the US close? Those countries will try to get nuclear weapons once they lose American military protection. If America closes a military base in some country in the Islamic world, in the East Asia, in Europe, then that country probably will get nuclear weapons just for deterrence purposes. Now, I'm not worried about Latin America getting nuclear weapons. US will collapse and recover in 10 to 20 years. That's the best case scenario, but it is most likely scenario, most possible scenario, I guess you can say. Once US is back, it will still be a major global power. It just probably will not be a superpower like it was post World War II, or a hyperpower like it has been since the collapse of the Soviet Union. US will probably be, in terms of global power, the way it was in early 20th century till the Second World War. That means the Monroe Doctrine will still apply. US will not allow any Latin American country to become a nuclear power. US has to blunder really hard for a Latin American country to successfully become a nuclear power. America will not allow that. If America allows it, it's a blunder. It will not happen. Also, Russia and China probably will not allow any African country to become a nuclear power. So this is what I'm worried about. Nuclear proliferation in the multipolar world. I hope I'm wrong about this, but this is a possibility. Now we come to the last topic. TikTok ban. Along with the spending bill, that $95 billion spending bill, there was a legislation to introduce TikTok ban. The previous administration, the Trump administration, tried to ban TikTok, but they failed. But the issue has been picked up again in recent months. After the failed attempt, TikTok accelerated Western liberal propaganda, the algorithm. But they made a mistake. They started boosting pro-Palestine, pro-Islamist propaganda after the October 7 attack on Israel. Islam has found an unlikely ally in liberalism. This is why liberalism shows double standards on many issues when it comes to religion. You can criticize Hinduism or Christianity on issues like women's rights, LGBT rights, rituals, practices, gods, freedom of speech, but you can't do it for Islam. Now, I'm not going after Islam here, but liberalism for its hypocrisy. Anyone criticizing Islam is labeled bigot or Islamophobic for the same issues you can criticize Hinduism or Christianity for. Islam gets a pass on these issues under tolerance. Again, I'm pointing out liberal hypocrisy here, not a religious argument. So anyway, TikTok boosted pro-Palestine propaganda under the guise of liberalism. Like I said, TikTok was boosting Western liberal propaganda. So that's how Islamic content got a pass. The pro-Palestinian content got a pass. That's why. Osama bin Laden's letter to America also went viral. This has upset Jewish groups like ADL and APAC. If I can find a leaked phone call of ADL's leader talking about TikTok, I'll include it in the episode.
I also want to point out that we have a major generational problem. All the polling I've seen, ADL's polling, ICC's polling, independent polling, suggests this is not a left-right gap, folks. The issue in the United States of support for Israel is not left and right. It is young and old. And the numbers of young people who think that Hamas's, massacre was justified is shockingly and terrifyingly high. And so we really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem, that our community needs to put the same brains that gave us Taglit, the same brains that gave us all these other amazing innovations, need to put our energy toward this, like, fast. Because again, like, we've been chasing this left-right divide. It's the wrong game. The real game is the next generation, and the Hamas and their accomplices, the useful idiots in the West, are falling in line in ways that are terrifying. Last thing I'll just say, we saw a dramatic change in the language of the activists here in America on October the 8th. The language of groups that we've long tracked, who've long been problematic, like Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace, they flipped like this and went to like Iranian propaganda. The language I could show you from their toolkits, because our analysts are in their groups. We saw this again on October the 8th. It was that fast. Like, the language in their toolkits was all about the Zionist entity and lots of other language that we recognized from Iranian.
So that's why TikTok ban issue is now back. The bill passed in the House of Representatives in the US government. This bill gave TikTok 6 months to divest from ByteDance or face ban. There's now a bill in the Senate in the US government that expands the window to 9 months to divest from ByteDance or get banned. At least that's the US version will get divested from the version that's under the ByteDance, not the global version. And that bill has passed the Senate. And the President Biden signed the bill just few hours ago, if I remember correctly. ByteDance or TikTok has 9 months to divest or get banned. TikTok posted on X, "It is unfortunate that the House of Representatives is using the cover of important foreign and humanitarian assistance to once again jam through a ban bill that would trample free speech rights of 170 million Americans, devastate 7 million businesses, and shutter a platform that contributes $24 billion to US economy annually." President Biden signed the bill, and TikTok is expected to challenge the bill in courts. Let's see what happens in 9 months. Will TikTok divest its US business? Unlikely. And also, Chinese government, I think it was in 2020, they signed the bill that bans any algorithms from being sold without the Chinese government permission or something like that. There was this bill. So it's unlikely the divestiture will happen, and there's probably going to be some kind of retaliation for this from the Chinese government. Because again, same thing happened to Huawei few months ago. a few years ago. Huawei got banned, now TikTok is getting banned. I don't think the Chinese will tolerate this. We'll see what happens. Alright, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.